This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rappin. Joining me this week, two Colonial Marines on their first planetside drop, Brian Murray.
It's going to be a straight-up fight or just another bug hunt?
And Nick White.
Get ready for some chop.
Game over, man. No one said the line. All right. This week on I Read Comic Books, this is episode 298. We are very, very close to episode 300, so get excited. Today we're going to be talking about Aliens, the Aliens franchise, specifically a handful of comics that we'll talk about in a little bit. One thing I want to say before we get started today is I want to welcome a brand new patron that we have on our Patreon, David P. Thank you so much for supporting us. We really hope that you enjoy all of the amazing content over there, like the IRCB Movie Club, Saga of Saga, Giant Days of Our Lives, Paul and Mike read Doom Patrol, book versus book. I mean, there's way too many things over there. So if you get a chance, go check it out and let us know what you think. But let's get into things. Let's talk about comic books. I have these two questions I need to ask, and they are, how have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Nick.
Things have been good. Things have been busy. It's been a real eventful weekend. Got to see my sister and my brother-in-law, and I spent most of that time in front of a computer, but if you can't spend your time in front of a computer with your relatives, then do you really... Maybe I shouldn't have spent time in front of a computer with my relatives. Maybe that was...
I don't know where you were going with that, man.
Yeah. You have to know someone really well to just sit in front of a computer in front of them, maybe.
I see.
I don't know. Maybe. Let's just go to comics, because clearly...
we got some things to work out in the break, I think.
Clearly, I've got some discussions that have to happen. Yeah, here are some things I read. I read Fish Flies 1-1 and 1-2, or I think he's organizing them as parts folded into chapters. This is Jeff Lemire's book that is exclusively right now on his Substack. This is the first title that he's publishing this way. I know this because Mike dragged me kicking and screaming into this new uncharted frontier of comics.
Yeah.
And he kindly / maliciously signed me up for this.
Mm-hmm.
I think he knows that, much as Stevie Nicks put it, I'm afraid of changes. And so here we are. Mike is the little puppet from Saw. Okay, we'll just put it at that. But it's been interesting to get these emails probably about every other day.
Yeah.
It's every other day. It's not every day. That's Jake Paul, bro. And
no, Nick. I'm stopping the show.
Oh God. But you get a real peek behind the curtain. Everything from scheduling, which, if you know much about Jeff Lemire, like, he is a scheduling king. Like, he can schedule flex on everybody. When I had heard the rumors that Lemire had written all of Bloodshot Reborn, or close to it, before the first issue hit store shelves, I couldn't believe it. But the more and the more and the more I hear, and based on everything that I've read, it's true. It's 100% true. So you get to see some of that. You get to see process artwork. You get to see other projects he's working on. You get to see some of his early artwork from stuff that's actually never been published. He's also sort of doing like a autobiographical look at sort of his path to where he currently is as an artist. So there's a lot of stuff there. It's interesting. I definitely feel like people are getting their money's worth. I don't know if that's true for all Substacks. I don't know. So right now, it's just these little 4-page installments as far as this Fish Flies series goes.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually really enjoy what I've seen so far. There's not a whole lot going on yet. And at this point, we've only gotten 8 pages of this book, so there's not a lot to go on. But it involves these kids in Canada. They're in a little town late on a summer night, and they're heading to the mini mart in search of ice cream. And instead what they find is a mini mart parking lot full of dead insects, and they start to dare each other as to, who's going to walk across these dead insects to go get the ice cream. And it starts to turn into something that feels like a, what is that movie where the kids find like the dead body? Is that Stand By Me?
That is Stand By Me.
Okay, yeah. It feels like it's got some real Stand By Me vibes.
Mm-hmm.
I've enjoyed this. I also feel like this peek behind the curtain sort of, I'll get into that in a second when I briefly discuss the other book I read. Also Jeff Lemire. It's not my fault, everyone. I know
Sure.
it feels like it's Jeff Lemire week every week I'm on. If he wasn't so prolific, this wouldn't be a problem.
I mean, last week was also Jeff Lemire week, so like it's just he puts out so many goddamn comic books.
It's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. And then sometimes, like, especially in this Substack, he's like, "Yeah, I don't know what was happening, guys. Like, I feel like I've been in a real rut recently, and I'm not getting anything out or whatever." I'm like, "What the fuck?" He's like, "I know I was a little behind on this. And I was beating myself up or something." I was like, "What?" So
Jeff,
the other book
this isn't my final form, Lemire.
It's ridiculous. Like, I feel like he has like Charles Soule circa
like 2015,
2012, 2013, and like Matt Kint circa like 20, about the same era on his wall as like his two like mentors or something at this point, and it's just as many books as he can do. I do want to also mention, because it kind of interconnects with Fish Flies, that I read May's book #1, also all Jeff Lemire except letters by Steve Wan, so that would be the one exception between the two. And I think whether you love Lemire's art style or hate it, or maybe it took a while for it to grow on you, or maybe you just skip over the quote unquote all Lemire titles, I still think you should try this one out. The title follows a character named Will Warren. He's a 50-year-old building inspector who we come upon 10 years after he lost his daughter, Wendy. He's basically buried himself in a soul-sucking autopilot mode of sorts, you know, the typical despondent showering, clock in and clock out work, an unwillingness to socialize with neighbors or coworkers, dinner alone on a card table in front of a television. Wait, is this guys, I actually wrote this for a different document. This is for my own. This is sorry.
Yeah, you brought your therapy homework on.
Yeah. Whoops. Will Warren. Everyone now knows the name I check into hotels with. No. And so you have this guy, and he's clearly very depressed. He says, you know, I'm nothing, just routine, too scared to be anything else anymore. And yes, this feels a whole lot like Royal City. If you remember Royal City from Jeff Lemire a couple years ago, pretty heavy stuff, very like family drama slash trauma slash, you know, issues, unresolved issues for generations and decades back, etc., etc. But this work feels, I like this work more. It's not really in color. It's pencils and inks with a gray, I think he describes it as like a gray wash. I know this because he discussed this on the Substack. And I actually hate the Substack now because I wrote a whole bunch of my notes about, geez, this work seems more focused than Royal City. It seems like he probably did it this way because there really aren't any colors. So I'm sure it was faster to get out the door. It's less distracting. I made all these interesting and salient points. And then like 4 days later, wouldn't you know it, Jeff fucking Lemire writes in his Substack, pretty much reaffirms everything I was coming to my own conclusions on, and he pulls the fucking rug out from under Jeff. Who gets to be the expert on Jeff Lemire if you've decided that you get to be the expert on Jeff Lemire? It's pissing me off.
I'm sorry that I burdened you with this Substack subscription, Nick. I really apologize for that.
I felt so smart. And now everyone's going to be like, yeah, well, you just read the Substack. I realize that's like a very niche thing.
Yeah.
You're pretty safe. I don't think anyone is going to say that.
We are this close to me like recreating the music video to Stan, except it's me and Jeff Lemire.
Oh my God.
And Jeff, if you want to make that music video, let's do it. We'll put some quarantine protocols into place, and we'll just shoot our parts from different rooms. It'll be good.
Are you going to dye your hair blonde and start to dress like Jeff and all that stuff? Because I imagine like, oh my God, you're taking the Devin Sawa character and you're just kind of rolling with it.
I get the square rimmed, glasses, and I wear the flannel, and oh my God.
I mean, you're like halfway there, Nick. Like, I know you.
This is fucking perfect. No, honestly, if this feels like if maybe Essex County wasn't for you, and maybe, like I said, Royal City was a little just unrelentingly just depressing and also very distracting from the color work, this feels focused. It feels like a sharper version of like Essex County visuals with the tighter plot that we've seen from his more recent work. And I think it's great from that perspective.
Except for it's fucking $6 for a single issue.
It is $6.
And I know it's like 50 pages, but like I'm just going to trade weight this book.
Yeah, but I think the difference between that and a lot of the other ones that I think gives this book a real push forward is there's actually just a real sense of mystery. Throughout this book, Will really doesn't say what happened to his daughter. We're given some glimpses of, Will's time with Wendy when she grows up. We find out that she was 11 when whatever happened. We know that Wendy's mother's name's Elena, and we're left to infer that something happened between Elena and Will, but we don't really know what happened to Wendy. He never even clearly says that she's dead.
Gotcha.
Or anything like that. So there's this sort of mystery element. He starts seeing this imagery throughout his day-to-day life of strings, of thread, of, sort of like chords. And then we find out, I won't get into that. I'm not going to get into that.
This book.
All I'm going to say is
just came out.
We see this increasingly, vivid imagery of twine and cords and thread. And that's all leading to a very weird, bizarro twist at the end of the issue that I think gives it a real kick in the pants to move forward in the way that some of his other works like this feel very navel-gazing. And you're like, well, who's going to push this onward? It just seems like everyone's depressed and doesn't know what to do. And I don't need to read a book for that. So, yeah.
Gotcha.
Get this book.
Okay, I was going to say, should I read this or should I not based off of that? But okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to, like I said, but I probably trade weight this. Brian, I mean, are you jumping on this Maze book?
Maze book?
Probably not.
Okay.
Doesn't really sound like my jam,
Fair enough.
Much more of a bang bang explosions kind of comic book reader.
Gotcha. I guess with that, how have you been? How have comic books been? Given what I know is in the notes.
I've been good. I haven't been reading a whole lot of comics lately, but I have been playing a lot of video games.
Ooh. Anything good?
Okay. Brian might need to look at the name of the podcast, but outside
all right, Nick. All right.
Nick might need to look at my butt.
Got him.
No, the newest installment in the Life is Strange series came out, which listeners will know I'm a huge fan of. This is Life is Strange True Colors, where you're actually playing as
Cyndi Lauper.
I mean, you are playing as a musical young woman. She arrives to live with her brother in a small Colorado town, but she has this weird empath power where she can pick up on people's emotions and kind of like read their surface thoughts through them. It's a very fun game, currently rivaling the first one for me in terms of like which game is my favorite in the series. But yeah, if you're at all into that kind of like walking simulator, talk to people, figure out mysteries kind of game, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I saw a lot of chatter about that, I think, on the internet in general, just because I think, like you said, it's at that same level of the first game. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, comics wise, I did find time to sit down and read Black Widow: The Ties That Bind. This is written by Kelly Thompson, with a whole cast of artists, including Elena Casagrande and Rafael de la Torre, as well as Carlos Gomez and Federico Blee on issue 4, I believe, or 5. Colors by Jordi Belair, and letters by VC's Corey Petit. I actually read this book for our Goodreads Book of the Month. So rather than spend a whole lot of time talking about it, I'll just direct you to Patreon, where you can listen to that.
Yeah, it should be out at the end of this month.
You just got paywalled, folks. You just got paywalled.
I will say briefly that I think this book is a great opportunity for new readers who want to get into Black Widow in some way, because this book does not require a whole slew of advanced knowledge of Black Widow to understand and enjoy.
Mhm.
Like, I went into it basically blind, but as long as you know who Black Widow is, who Winter Soldier is, and who Hawkeye is, all stuff you can get from the MCU, then I think you're going to be fine. There's something about this, like, because in the book, I'll tell you, because it happens in the first issue, Black Widow winds up brainwashed living a quiet life in California. And it reminded me a lot of that sort of trend that's going on in movies, where we have like this deadly super spy living a quiet life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The first thing that came to my mind was The Equalizer, which is worth watching, if only for the scene where Denzel Washington kills a bunch of mobsters in a Home Depot. And what I can only describe as like a fucked up Home Alone situation.
No. Okay.
I mean, Home Alone was pretty fucked up, but sure.
It's a lot of fun. To a lesser degree, it's kind of like John Wick in that the spy is forced out of their quiet life at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Not as much so as The Equalizer, but it's there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, that was a fun book to read. Brian and I recorded that for the Goodreads book of the month, so make sure to go check that out. It's going to be out, like I said, at the end of the month on Patreon, since we do those every other month, which is pretty fun.
Yeah, what about you, Mike?
Oh, I've been reading a whole bunch of stuff. Read a bunch of Aliens for today's episode, but beyond that, I have been two books that I want to talk about real quick are Eternals Thanos Rising, or Thanos Rises. Jeepers Creepers. Yeah, this book's got a weird name, apparently. This is Kieran Gillen and Dustin Weaver on art. The story in this book, if you read Kieran Gillen's Eternals, I think there was a handful of issues that came out, like 10 issues or something. The story, I think, is still in the middle of ongoing. I can't even remember. Like, I can't keep track of what's happening in that book. All I know is that it comes out and I get to stare at Asadi Ribik's art every month and I'm happy. This book is kind of like a history of Thanos, is how Thanos came to be. At least the beginning of this is. There's a lot of the mythology and lore of the Eternals, how they have had different eras of war and like people taking different roles in the Eternals' overall structure. And there's a lot of things that I feel like I still don't understand, even though this issue left me with a lot of questions answered. But yeah, I was surprisingly drawn into this book. I've never really been a big fan of the Eternals overall, but Kieran Gillen will probably get me to try a lot of different weird properties as long as he keeps writing them, if only because I can usually trust his hooks to at least get me on board and not feel like a total dimwit. Same with like, Al Ewing, and those guys just take an approach to some of these books that's really interesting. But I ultimately am not familiar with any of the mythos or lore behind the Eternals, and I would blame Neil Gaiman for that, but even then I didn't even read his book. So this is an interesting story. Kind of feels like a reminiscent of like Dustin Weaver is very much channeling like a classic 80s style of comics. It's very Kirby-esque in a lot of ways, in the way that he just approaches some of the various locations and scenery and stuff. Really small panels that have like a lot of busyness in them. But Dustin Weaver's art's pretty solid. I mean, I missed Asad Ribik's like same face style, if only for like the backgrounds and paintings that he does. But Weaver, to his credit, I think does a great job of making this feel like a quote unquote classic book that you would expect to find in like a dollar bin. The story of this book kind of outlines a portion of the era, or like a history, a time in the past for the Eternals. And the only call out that I'll say about this book that really annoyed me was the literal page of prose that was broken up into individual panels that like could have easily been a Bendis style, like just a single image with a ton of dialogue, but instead it was literally just person A says this and person B says this and person C says this. It was like, okay, so at least you understand that this is all dumb and stupid, right? Like putting this page together was clearly a choice rather than having art to go along with it. You were just like, let's just use as much page space as we can to just fill up with words. I honestly didn't know who was saying what, because I don't know any of these characters, so like a little lost, but like fair enough. Like I'm sticking around, so I'm on board for whatever Kieran Gillen's going to do, because this is all going to tie back to his Eternals run in general. So I'm here for it. I'm not interested in these characters, but something about this book keeps drawing me in. So
I think he knows that if he did put it just into a big block of text, nobody was going to read it.
Yeah. Well, I honestly, I need to find the screenshot for you. I was finding it in the break or whatever, so you can see what I'm talking about. It's really bizarre. But anyways, the other book I want to talk about really quick is Censor. This is by Junji Ito. My summary is, just a little existential dread for you if you're feeling that kind of thing.
Just a little. Mom, can we have some existential dread as a treat?
We have existential dread at home.
Yeah,
Nick.
I'm just combining all sorts of memes over here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're right.
Yeah, this book is, as you may expect from Junji Ito, a little weird, a little odd. For some reason, the overall vibe that I get from this is like some of those really strange A24 movies, like The Lighthouse or The Lobster, or maybe even that Nick Cage movie. This wasn't an A24 movie, but Mandy also came to mind.
Yeah.
Got it. So it thinks it's smarter than it actually is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brian.
Yeah, and it's really funny that you say that though, because the afterword of this book, Junji Ito was like, "Well, I had a direction that I wanted for this book, and I thought it was really cool, but the more I put it together, the more I realized it didn't work. So I simplified it." And I was like, "Okay." So,
respect. You got to respect that.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting is that Ito clearly had a direction from the first chapter of this book. So this is like a collection of 6 chapters. And he clearly had a direction that he wanted to go. And then it takes a wildly different turn in the second chapter, which again, with the afterward, it's like, oh, that all makes sense. But I think you get like the summary of this book is that there are people who live in this village that there's these volcanic hairs. These hairs are coming out of a volcano. I don't know if this is a real thing. I didn't Google it or anything, but like strands of soot, I think, get stuck together and they fall down to the ground out of a volcano after it's erupted or it's close to eruption, and they're called like volcanic hairs. So in this story, there are these golden volcanic hairs that fall on this village, and instead of kind of disappearing into the ether after a time, just with like wind and all that stuff, they stick around in this town. And if one lands on your head, you get these extra sensory powers. And so the title of the book, Sensor, comes from, that's what they call all of the senses then in your body. I was like, why not call it senses? I don't know. This is a weird fucking book. But yeah, so these people get all these powers, and then this volcano erupts and kills everyone in this village except for one woman.
Okay.
Right? And she comes into the town. She was an outsider. They brought her in because they said that God told her that she needed to be in this village. And so she gets these superpowers because she gets saved by this cocoon of golden hairs that surrounds her, and her hair goes from stark black to golden yellow, and she just starts to run away, and then a reporter hears about her. She ends up, it's crazy. This book goes all over the place, and like the twist and the horror element is that this woman is constantly on the run, but we don't follow her. Instead, we're following a reporter who's finding all the places where she's been and all the people she's interacted with, including a cult that wants to use her to contact a dark god, to basically bring about the end of existence by absorbing all knowledge that has ever existed and will ever exist. It's very out there. The most haunting part of this story is what is on the back cover of the collected edition. The more I look at that image, the more scared I get of like the beyond.
ISBNs.
Yeah, ISBNs scare the shit out of me. You
have a real phobia for barcodes.
But yeah, like there's just a lot of weird things that happen that like it's like watching like I said, a very strange artsy movie that has like a horror twist to it, where it's not jump scaring you, it's not trying to hit you with a lot of trope, it's just really creepy, and the whole book spends all of its time being extremely creepy. And I think that's what people like Junji Ito. Yeah. I've heard a lot of other folks who've read more of his work say this isn't his best, but I enjoyed this. I gave it like a 3 out of 5. I would say like it's worth the read if you can grab it at the library.
Didn't his work Spiral also have, which I think, weren't we all on that episode?
You and me were, Nick.
Yeah. Didn't that one also have someone with like demon hair, and the hair kept like spiraling around the person?
Yeah, there was a hair thing.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I do love that Junji Ito seems relatively put together as like an individual. He seems very nice and very polite. Like, so when like Rob Zombie's like, yeah, I'm gonna make The Hills Have Eyes, which I think was like him, I'm like, all right, these two projects seem to like, this individual would make this thing, that makes sense. And then like Junji Ito is just this polite man. He seems absolutely affable in like every interview he does. Obviously he loves his cats. And then you're like, oh, and this is the book he wrote, and it's like
slugs coming out of someone's eyes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that he's continued this theme of like the moral of his stories always seems to be get the fuck out of this little town. Like,
Yeah. Well, wasn't Spirals also about something falling down on the town? Wasn't it the crematorium, the ashes falling on the town? So there's
Interesting.
There's definitely some motifs about like small town life being equal parts boring / quaint and yet also terrifying, which feels like the Midwest punk, like, we gotta get out of this town thing. So maybe Junji Ito is just listening to Hawthorne Heights a lot. Maybe.
Secret pop punk kid, Junji Ito.
There's your episode title. Well, let's talk about comics that are coming out in the near future. Comics are dropping on September 22nd, 2021. I'm curious to know, what are you guys reading next, or what's your pick for this upcoming week? Let's start with you, Nick.
Yeah, so I will make this relatively short. For me, it's going to be, and this feels on the nose with this week's episode, but it's going to be Alien number 7.
Okay.
Surprise. We didn't plan this, folks. This is also going to be written by Philip Kennedy Johnson, art by Salvador LaRocca, etc., etc. Basically, it's the exact same art team from the first arc. The solicit is pretty interesting, though. It says, the search for sanctuary begins. A small colony of spinners looking to lead a simpler life have nearly completed terraforming a moon. A ship crashes into their Eden from the heavens. A terror is unleashed. They didn't follow that up by writing that terror is an alien. I guess they really...
I have to wonder, though. What's it going to be in this alien book?
Probably not going to be a xenomorph. They wouldn't do that twice.
Look, I'm just saying, like, this book is not going to connect the dots for you, okay? You're going to have to figure that out on your own, all right? It's gonna... It's leaving the hard work to the reader. I don't know if some of us will be up for that, but...
Nick, and I hate doing work.
Yeah, and we'll get into this more when we talk about the first arc, but basically, based on what I'm seeing, it does seem like this feels like it might be a clean break from the first arc, which could be interesting. We'll discuss that more after the break.
The one thing I will say, in terms of like summaries for Alien stuff, Kelly and I, after we watched Aliens yesterday, we were looking at all of the other Alien movies, and we were looking at like the summaries, and Amazon at least has the summaries for the Alien movies as Aliens. The summary is Ripley is rescued by a salvage team.
Oh my God, I saw that. Yeah.
Alien, the summary is a mysterious life form attacks. Alien 3, strange and deadly events occur. Like, what the fuck?
I mean, that's not
actually
wrong.
That sounds better than Alien 3, so that might actually be working in their favor.
I love that. So, like, honestly, be as obtuse as possible with your descriptions, because we know what's going to happen.
I gotta find out what the Alien Resurrection tagline looks like.
It just says don't. It just says...
Oh, here, I'll give it to you. Ripley continues battling aliens is literally the title or the summary. Oh,
fucking
man.
Superb.
It should just say Brad Dourif wants to fuck an alien. That's what... Dourif? I don't know.
Brian, what about you? What are you reading next, or what's on your pick list for this week?
So it's actually a trade that came out in July, so I'm breaking format a little bit here. The trade is called Bubble. It's written by Jordan Morris and Sarah Morgan with illustration by Tony Cliff. It's actually a comic based on a podcast, which I know is going to make me fall a few ranks in Paul's eyes, but it's set in this world where it's like an alien planet. Humanity lives primarily in these bubbles, as the title suggests. Mm-hmm. But sometimes monsters from the outside get in. And so this company creates an app called Hunter, where you can gig economy monster slayers.
Okay.
And so we're following somebody whose gig job, like Uber, is to essentially hunt monsters for people. And it gets into sort of the weird stuff about like people who go to slay monsters and bring bottled water with them to give the clients and stuff. Like it's very much like a commentary on that lifestyle.
Huh. I mean, this looks cool.
Yeah, it's a very fun podcast too. It's a limited series, so like it tells its story and then it's over, which I always appreciate. I think it came out in like 2017, 2018, something like that.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's really good, and it's being adapted by or published by First Second. So I have a lot of faith that it's going to be a good adaptation, because I don't think I've read something put out by that company I didn't enjoy.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the preview art, and it looks pretty good. Yeah,
I definitely recommend checking it out, or at least give the first episode of the podcast a listen.
Danny in the chat right now is asking, Brian, are you going to announce the I Read Comic Books podcast comic that's coming out very soon? Or I think that's episode 300. That's when our big announcement's going to be.
Yeah,
that we're releasing that.
Yeah, we're gonna have to get on finding an artist for that.
Yeah. Well, for me this week, I guess before I get into my picks, Danny, who's hanging out with us in the chat right now, remember you can always find the IRCB Discord in our show notes, and you can listen to our episodes live on Sundays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard. Danny's pick this week is Frontiersman #1 from Image Comics. I have no idea what that is, but with a name like that, it better be good, right? I don't know why I'm holding this comic to such a high standard, but it's a Green Arrow styled comic, so at least that's what the description says. For me this week, though, I am excited for the X-Men new little one-shot that's coming out. X-Men, The Onslaught Revelation. This is by Simon Spurrier on writing, art by Bob Quinn, colors by Javier Tartaglia, letters by Clayton Coles. This spins right out of Way of X, and I'm here for it. I can't wait for it because I loved Way of X.
Is this the book that was being advertised in the Alien comics that we read for today?
Maybe. It might have been. I didn't. I was reading this digitally, so I didn't see any ads.
Oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of ads about like, we can't trust our leaders, we can't trust our friends. Revelations are coming.
Yeah. So there was a big reveal in the Way of X book that was like, what happens in that gap between, with the X-Men books that are happening right now, you can die, you can be resurrected, right? But what if your last backup was 2 days ago, or your last like mental backup was a week ago? What happens in that time? You get basically rewound by a week, and you kind of have to catch up, which is not crazy, but there is a question of like, does your personality change? Or do you become a different person during the resurrection process? Are you the same person if you have the same mind? And Simon Spurrier was exploring a lot of that, asking a lot of questions. And then there was kind of like a ham-fisted like action story pushed into the book. But the reveal in the middle of the book and near the end of basically that Onslaught is involved in all of this and some of these questions was really interesting. And I think this is the follow-up to that, is that there is an unknown thing that Professor X and the Quiet Council of the X-Men have not been talking about, I think. And so we're going to see what's actually going on in this little one-shot that's coming out. So I would say if you're going to jump on this one-shot, make sure you've read Way of X before you pick this up. I'm sure they're going to have a summary for everyone who didn't do that, but go read Way of X because it's great, and that team was really, really solid.
If there's one thing I learned from trying to read some of that, like the House of X stuff, is that it is the opposite of that Black Widow comic I talked about, where you need a fucking dossier if you're going to get into that. Because I started reading, I was like, I don't know who this is. I don't know what we're talking about.
I mean, but that's what the data pages are for, Brian. The full page of prose that you need to read, otherwise you won't understand a lot of things. Come on. It's right there.
I haven't read a prose book since college. I don't read books.
Well, just give me the audiobook version of all the data pages, right?
Which is just going to be you reading it out loud. I'm going to make you call me on Discord before every issue.
That's fine. I could do that.
It is always really great to see how many people with English degrees are like, nah, I'm not reading books. No thanks. I did that.
Did it for a time.
That's me too, Brian. It's like, nah.
I still do a lot of like audiobooks and stuff, but I'm not just gonna sit down and turn pages.
How dare you ask me?
I've got video games to play.
Well, with all that, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about Aliens. We're going to be talking about the Aliens Dead Orbit, Aliens Aftermath, all sorts of comics. So we'll be back to jump right into that. Oh, and I will say one last thing. We do have an interview. There's a Kickstarter chat with Leslie Julien and Brian Flint about Savage Wizard, which I believe is out as of today. So go check that out on Kickstarter. There's going to be a link to that in the show notes, and listen to the interview in the middle of the episode. We'll be back after that. To everyone listening at home, I am joined by two comic book extraordinaires. I've heard you guys say that on a previous podcast, so I'm going to use it here. I am joined by Leslie Julien and Brian Flint, co-creators of the brand new, currently running as you're listening to this episode, Savage Wizard Kickstarter. Very excited to check that out. I hope everybody at home goes to savagewizard.com to check out the Kickstarter. From what I've seen, it looks absolutely amazing. But I'm here to talk with Leslie and Brian about this comic and how they got into comics and all that stuff. So let's just dive right into it. Leslie, who are you? What got you into comic books in the first place?
Oh God, that's a huge question, right? I would say, I didn't actually read a ton of comics growing up just because my parents, I guess, kind of thought they were pricey. So I had one random X Factor comic as a kid, but I actually didn't really read comics regularly until I want to say college, really. And I kind of just fell into it with Runaways and Civil War. And I've always had a lifelong obsession with Ninja Turtles. So I was reading I think Dreamwave Ninja Turtles and stuff like that. So that kind of is what got me into comics. I started writing comics. Basically, I've always written stuff and even drew for a little bit as a kid, but I definitely fell out of that. But basically, my wife, she suggested I do it, and I didn't know how at the time. So I just went online and figured this is something you can learn how to write comics. So started adapting short stories into comics, and then it kind of slowly progressed from writing one-page short stories to 4 or 5-page short stories, and then 16-page comic, and now Savage Wizard is my full-length debut, you could say, after 7-8 years of writing comics, pretty much.
Awesome. And Brian, what about you? Who are you, and how'd you get into comics?
I've been an illustrator for about 10 years, part-time, full-time, that kind of thing. I got into comics pretty far back when I was a kid, but mostly just hanging out at the library, reading Calvin and Hobbes and whatever was, free. Because same boat where buying them was way too expensive. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Gotcha. And I guess what got you drawing comic books and stuff like that? Did you go to school for it, or was it something that kind of developed over time outside of things?
I went to an art high school, but they weren't super focused on. They were more like a fine arts kind of thing.
Gotcha.
I had graduated from high school and was kind of artistically lost. I had all these skills and met all these people that were doing all this cool stuff, and I didn't know where to go. And a friend of mine was like, well, you like telling stories and you can draw, so why don't you try making comics? And I actually had known of a couple of classmates who'd got into professional, comic work and stuff like that. And, I figured I'd try.
And here we are. I mean, and here you guys have, I've seen some fantastic preview pages for this book. And, I think it's worked out from what I've seen so far. I'll just say that.
Appreciate it.
And I guess speaking of the book Savage Wizard, I guess can you guys tell me a little bit about where this book came from, and I guess maybe Leslie, you can start. Where did this book come from, and what made you want to tell this kind of story? I mean, this is a really cool looking fantasy book.
Yeah, so basically it came about in November. There's something called Pitchvember where you're supposed to come up with a pitch every day, basically. So a quick little log line idea. So I was originally inspired by it, funny enough, by my co-writer, Doug Wood. He had said that he was participating in it, and I was like, hey, that's a cool idea. So I was coming up with ideas, and one of them was kind of what if a barbarian had to become a wizard, pretty much. And Doug, he had approached me. He had seen some of the shorts I'd been doing and thought they were cool, and said, hey, you want to write something together? And I had never co-written, so I was a little nervous, but I was like, sure. And so we were kind of going back and forth, kind of thinking of what we could do together. And I threw that one out at him, I gave him that idea, what if a barbarian had to become a wizard? And he's like, yeah, that's the one. Let's do that. And he was just super down for it. And honestly, once we had idea, things just kind of gelled so quickly and so fast. And Doug made it really easy to co-write, because I don't think either of us had experience before, but it felt really natural and fun. And we wrote it fairly quickly, if I remember correctly.
Gotcha. And how did you put together the team, I guess, for this book? If you started with the pitch, you worked on the script and stuff, like how did you assemble this huge group of folks that you've got working on the book? Or I guess handful of folks, I should say.
Yeah. So me, Doug, and Brian, funny enough, were all, I guess you would say, alumni of the Comic Jam, which was pretty much like an online group, which weekly would pair an artist and a writer together to come up with a quick comic just based on a random prompt. And I remember seeing Brian's work there, but I never got the chance to collaborate with him just because it's literally kind of random assortment, like, picking the artist and writer together. So I never got the chance to work with them, but I was like, man, this guy's art is cool. And so like when we were basically had the script finalized and we were thinking of people, like Brian came to mind just because I knew like he could draw something with like a lot of physicality and a lot of half-naked guys running around. And I immediately thought of Brian, and then luckily he was available to work with us. And yeah, it's been a great pairing because I mean when people see Brian's art, their eyes open up, they open up wide.
Yeah, that was the thing that, I mean, you sent over a couple of pages to me and I was just like, holy smokes, like this is some serious stuff. I mean, Brian, what's your approach to Leslie's script when you see stuff on the page? I mean, I realize I've looked into the comic process. I mean, it's a script that becomes panels and so on and so forth. But for this book, what was your approach for each of the pages?
Well, when I first got the script and I had read it, a lot of it was really clear. Like the characters are right there. Mm-hmm. Like, I really didn't have to do a whole lot of work to like flesh out what they would look like and all that, because when reading the characters, you kind of have a picture of your head, what they look like. The writing was so good that, that made that part of the process really easy. And another thing that really made it a fun job to work on was that when they sent me reference material, like, we kind of want you guys, we want you to go this way, and we kind of think the guys should look this way. And it was like all these Samoan and like African, like people of color in there. That is what made the project like jump ahead than any other regular barbarian, what's it called? Sword and, stone, whatever it's called.
Sword and sorcery kind of stuff. Yeah.
Sorcery, thank you. Like you see Conan and it's, it's the usual like blonde haired dude who's like, usually fighting really racist, drawings of, other people from around the world. And this was like just all people who, looked like dudes I grew up around. And it made a big difference in how I saw the book, and really opened up a lot of stuff that I already really love to draw.
Yeah, I mean, it seems pretty clear to me from just a handful of things that I've seen that like this book is a lot of fun, and it looks like it's going to be probably one of the most action-packed Kickstarter books I'm going to support, at least, or I've supported in a long while, because this there's a page that I think you guys are using for the cover of the Kickstarter right now, which is just a bunch of dudes running with swords and axes and all sorts of different weapons, and it looks just absolutely insane. I'm really curious to know. I almost would love to see like a page by page breakdown, but I'm actually curious as far as folks that are looking to support the Kickstarter. What kind of rewards could they potentially get if they choose to support it?
So one of the coolest rewards, one of the biggest rewards, I think that people are definitely going to flock to, because Brian's art is there is a reward to get drawn into the book, basically. As a barbarian. So we kind of talked about, like what kind of gruesome kills that you could potentially get if Brian draws you into the book. But that's definitely one I think that people are definitely going to flock to for sure. We also kind of like a video chat tier, basically. So any people maybe newer to comics can talk to me and Doug and get some help on either pitching or scripting or whatever they might need some help with. And also we have some mini print tiers. There's going to be individual ones and collected as well, but we have two artists I think people are going to be excited to see that are contributing mini prints, and also we're going to have two interior pages of Brian's that are also going to be mini prints. So there's a collected tier of that, so if people are art hounds, then I think they'll be excited for that. And we also have your standard digital and getting the book physical as well. And there's a digital bundle where you could get my older book, Ghost Gauntlet, and Doug's book, which one is Doug providing? I believe, Ultramax. So yeah, I think there's a lot of cool stuff for people to grab once we go live.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I love to hear, with a good Kickstarter. I mean, and as far as, this series, this is the number one. Are you guys looking to make like a longer series out of it, or is this like a standalone comic to start?
So we're kind of pitching it as just like a shorter mini series. We had like 4 issues in mind, and we're not trying to think too far past that. We have 4 issues. I think we could craft some things past that, but for right now, we just have this 4-issue arc in mind at the moment.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, to completely shift gears, the one thing that I noticed as I was trying to dig a little bit of information, about you guys for the for the interview today, Leslie, you seem to be like a pretty big proponent of Kickstarter comics, at least on Twitter. I saw a lot of retweets of different things like stuff like that. And that's awesome because I am a huge supporter of that. I think I've backed far too many Kickstarter comics in terms of just not being able to keep up with what I want to read. But I love what Kickstarter does for the comic books community. So I'm curious to know, like, what do you think Kickstarter is doing well, or what makes you excited about like working with Kickstarter or on Kickstarter to make this comic happen?
I mean, Kickstarter is great in that it kind of eliminates some of the gatekeeping that is, unfortunately a part of comics, just because, I mean, it can't always be helped, but just because, there's so many creators now, and I mean, editors can only handle so much of the stuff that's getting thrown at them. So, I mean, basically, instead of waiting for a yes or no from, a publisher, I can say, like, hey, like, we need this amount to make this book a reality. Let's go to Kickstarter. And I mean, from the pre-launch support that we're getting, I'm feeling every day more and more confident that, this is going to happen.
Definitely.
We are, the majority of funding is to get Brian paid for his, amazing work. Like, I think people are just going to flip when they see, like, how detailed Brian's work is. Like, it's absolutely incredible, like just the amount of detail that he's cramming into these pages, So yeah, Kickstarter is like just a huge part of the comics industry right now. It's almost like another publisher in some respects.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm curious to know when you guys are going to start your Substacks, and then we can talk about that and all that stuff. Well, you said that, the goal of this is to make sure everybody gets paid. I think that's one thing that seems to be like, especially there's a lot of comic book discourse about like people getting paid late and getting all this other stuff. It seems like Kickstarter is a direct, like, I'm going to give you this thing, and hopefully you're going to be able to give me the comic in return. And I've always supported that because it feels like the most direct way to get comics from people outside of going to like Gumroad or something like that, where, there's people just have independent shops and stuff. So, I mean, it's really cool that this is happening. And if you guys are seeing really good support, that's awesome. I'm glad that it's working for creators of all like sorts, from whether you're a huge name and, you're a Scott Snyder that needs to go on Kickstarter, or you're, trying to fund an indie comic. It's good to hear that things are working for you guys. And I guess one of the last questions I have for you guys here is, what kind of comics are you into when you're not writing your own and working on your own? What kind of stuff are you trying to read?
Right now, I've been reading Ultra Mega, trying to catch up because there's like 4 or 5 issues of it out. Mm-hmm. And that James Herron, man, that dude makes me so mad at how good he is. I love his work.
Yeah, that book is beautiful. I think some of the pages on that just absolutely stun me with like the way that he uses so many dark colors, but the book is still so very vibrant at the same time. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, he crushes scale, man. Like, I don't know how he does it. He just makes those dudes look huge. Mm-hmm, and, just the way, the whole kaiju angle that he's going with. It's just an amazing book. I love that book.
Definitely. Leslie, what about you? What's the first book that comes to mind?
The first book that comes to mind, I'm behind on it, but Gideon Falls. I really want to keep going with that book. What Jeff Lemire is doing with that is, just crazy, and I love it. And I need more, but I'm behind on it, so I need to get caught back up.
No, I'm the same way. That book creeps me the hell out, but I can't stop thinking about it, like wanting to read more of it.
Yes.
Definitely. So
it's incredible. I don't know where his mind is going with that, but I love it, and I don't understand it, but it's amazing and terrifying and brilliant.
Definitely. I mean, Andrea Sorrentino on that book too. Like, every page is impressive beyond belief.
Agreed.
Well, I guess to wrap things up, the last thing I'll say is, where can people find you on the internet, and where can they find this Kickstarter that we've been talking about?
So you can find me, Leslie, on Twitter at LesWrite. That's LESWRITE. You can find me on Instagram at LES_WRITE. And the Kickstarter is savagewizard.com.
I'm on Instagram at Kuru Flint, KURUFLINT, and I'm on ArtStation under my real name.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming and talking at Irie Comic Books. We're just a little tiny podcast, so I appreciate you guys reaching out. And good luck with the Kickstarter. Fingers crossed it's going to get funded. Everything's going to be awesome. And I wish the best for both of you. For our show this week, we are talking all about a handful of Alien comics and a little bit about the Alien movie franchise. So if you haven't read Aliens Dead Orbit, Alien 2021 number 1 through 6, or Aliens Aftermath, which came out, I think, in 2021, make sure you hit pause, go read those, come back and listen to the conversation. Or if you don't care about spoilers, then you should be totally fine. We're going to go through all sorts of Alien things. I just got so many questions about these dang xenomorphs that Brian and Nick hopefully can answer. In the break, we talked all about android milk, and I think we're going to talk about android milk more in the actual episode. So I guess to get into things, we read the books that I listed. I think beyond Aliens Dead Orbit, this was like my first foray into Aliens comics. Beyond, I think, Nick, you recommended me a one-shot a long time ago that Mike Mignola had done, but I really haven't read much. We did the Fire and Ice, or Fire and Stone, Fire and Ice. What is this? Song of Ice and Fire?
It's Fire and Stone, and then it's Life and Death. Right.
Life and Death. Thank you. So I read some of that stuff, but really, I feel like of all of the stuff, like, these are some really interesting Aliens comics. So I guess of the four, or of the ones that we read, which ones do you guys want to talk about first?
I think we should kick off with Dead Orbit, right?
Okay. Yeah. This is the impossible to get now because Dark Horse has been taken over or lost the license to Aliens comics. So rip if you can't find that. But
they are. It's another casualty in Disney's ongoing bid to control everything we put our eyes on.
Mm-hmm. But this is a pretty legendary run in a lot of ways because it was James Stokoe doing everything. And for those of you who don't know, James Stokoe is someone who's done books like Orkstain, and he's known for putting out comics that have unbelievably detailed pencils, inks, and colors. It's unbelievable. Look up his stuff. But to see him doing an Aliens book is incredibly impressive. I remember when this was announced, I think everybody was losing their minds because they knew that this book was going to be killer. And as Danny in the chat has said, Dead Orbit slaps. So, Brian, tell me more about Dead Orbit.
Definitely. This is like the book that turned me into an Aliens fan. But like, before this, I had seen the movies and I thought they were pretty good. But this is what made me think, like, oh, there's actually a lot of cool stuff you can do in the Alien universe. So this is the story about a man who we're just going to call Wazzy because his last name is Polish and I can't pronounce it. I'm just going to be honest. I tried to figure it out and I'm just not going to do it the disservice. His friends call him Wassy, and I like to think we're friends. It's a story
what we experienced together. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a story of basically his time after an alien or a xenomorph infestation has destroyed his ship and killed most of his friends. And then we kind of cut back and we see how they got on the ship. And the whole story is sort of told through these flashbacks with periodic returns to the present to see what Wassy is up to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because of that, it really benefits from a reread. Because I think that, at least for me, that sort of threw me off on my first read through. Sort of the jumps back and forth, because they do seem like very deliberately paced. And I think it can be oddly distracting.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because I think my first read through, I wasn't aware that there were flashbacks happening.
Yeah.
Because the art style doesn't change too much between the present and the past. But once you get that through your head, I mean, it's like, oh shit. And by the end of this book, it all makes sense. But definitely worth a reread, because it's wonderful just to experience this book again. Like, these pages are unfucking believable. Honestly, I think I have the single issue somewhere in my storage of comics, but man, oh man, is this book like heavily detailed. Like how much time is this guy spending on every single page of this book, you know?
If you read his work on Godzilla, you know that like he already has a thing for giant smoke clouds and like
yeah.
and like exhaust explosions, and I'm sure that's why he signed on, because he's like, oh, Alien will have plenty of opportunities for smoke clouds.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
Yeah, and I think that's what he really nailed with this book, is that atmosphere that an Alien story should have.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is definitely the most like moody, atmospheric book I think I've ever read.
Yeah, and the lighting is not like, the coloring is more like sort of like smears of color. It's sort of just like a paintbrush effect than it is things carefully being, you know, distinctively colored in within the lines. And I think that only sort of adds that mood to it.
Yeah, it really feels like it's being lit by like emergency lighting or just the light from computer screens and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's like a weird, almost like Akira feel to it, where like the colors kind of bleed off of the lines that they were indicated for. Not in like an intense way, but enough where I was like, there's so much going on in this page, and then there's color on top of that. It's incredible.
Also like Akira in that everything has like pipes that look kind of like veins.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's the other thing I was just going to get at, is that like the way that he draws everything, like even the first quote unquote encounter that we have with an alien is the guy mistakenly seeing pipes that look like an alien, and then he goes, "Oh, it's not a big deal," and then there's an actual fucking alien there like 2 seconds later.
Classic bait and switch.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it felt like. It felt so cinematic, and the way that they did like the title pages in each of the issues, where it's James Stokoe, like it felt like the way that you would see a movie poster presenting, or like a trailer, you know, with this big black background and like this interesting font that has like the creator's name. Like such a smart way to do that, to add like a theatrical feel to the entire book.
Yeah, it's like the air purifier gag that it looks like a xenomorph head was just perfect. Like I stopped and I like looked at that panel again, just because the way he designed that air purifier is just it's genius. Like it really plays on this idea of, oh my gosh, like I'm seeing this everywhere, but is it really there? It's just it's a brilliant book. It hits a lot of, God, it's always such a tricky line to walk between giving fan service and then giving so much fan service that it's like, are you going to do anything other than give fan service or not? And there are just ways to do that creatively. And I think even some of the stuff in here, like, yeah, as you said, sort of the chords and the technology, sort of sinewy like veins, and he sort of nails that blurring of like sort of biology and technology that we saw so much in a lot of like H.R. Giger's designs, and I think that's that's definitely part of it. And of course, we've got a lot of the body horror. We've got a lot of the rampant smoking in space, which is always an Alien staple.
Always cracks me up.
I did not know that was the thing. Like I said earlier, I watched Aliens the sequel, right? And
that's
I
its
didn't
name.
realize
Yes.
how often people were smoking in space, but it is constant.
It is a closed atmosphere, guys. You can't do that.
It's just, there's always going to be smoking, and finally we have the answer. That smoking will come back. It's going to come back again, guys. It's
in a big way.
In a big way. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the other things I would really want to point out is, I think tonally, I think some people might be turned off by sort of the ending here, but I think in terms of an Alien story, it is dark, it is grim, but also it works for me.
I mean, but who's picking up an Aliens book hoping for a happy ending?
Well, yeah, and I hear you, but also if you look at even Alien and Aliens, there is kind of like a final happy ending moment, right? It's not like
well,
it's
ahead,
not
Brian.
that it's happy, it's that the endings usually aren't hopeless, and the ending to this
Right.
book was hopeless.
yes,
sure.
absolutely. Thank you, Brian. You nailed it.
It's funny that you say that though, because even looking at the rest of the books that we read, right? My thought was that every other case, at least my interpretation was, every other case of encountering a xenomorph resulted in people dying, and they all died. There's no matter what. Ripley is the exception. That is my take on it.
Yeah.
Because even if you look at like Prometheus, or if you look at Aliens, Alien 1, Alien 2, like the everyone dies who isn't Ripley, and there's something special about that character, right? I think like she's the protagonist of the entire franchise, which is why you don't see her in anything else, right? And this is me trying to scoot around and making a narrative out of the licensing. I don't want to get into the licensing stuff. Let's just not. I'm just saying my interpretation is that Ripley is that exception to the rule of when you encounter a xenomorph, there's nothing but death ahead for you. And I think that's even said to the extent where like these things are here, and we talk about it in the Alien 2021 series of like when people encounter these things, they reached out to the stars, and what's out there is only death. And how foolish of you to think that you could survive out there. So I don't know. That's my overall take on it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say this just because you you watched the movie yesterday, Mike. Who was still alive at the end of the film, because it wasn't just Ripley.
Well, okay, yes, Nick, I understand. Like, I'm not saying it's a blanket, absolute anything. I'm just saying like all the other stories that you can encounter, especially when it comes to the comics and stuff. Like, every single one of them is bleak. No one's coming out of that thinking that there is some sort of hope. Like, you encounter a xenomorph and that's it. Game over, man. Game over.
Yeah.
Was this all just working up so you could say that?
He was
partially.
Definitely
I was on a track there. Yeah.
If you're interested in a more like varied alien story, I'd recommend checking out the book Bug Hunt. It's actually a short story compilation. But it's all set in the Alien universe, and there's a whole bunch of different stories. There's stuff about like the colonial marines, and there's stuff about like settlers being attacked. There's one whole story that's just about like it is framed as a documentary on the construction of the pulse rifle that the colonial marines use.
That's cool.
It's a really good compilation. The audiobook is also very well done.
I mean, I guess what I would say is I feel like the ending of Dead Orbit works, and I guess maybe having that come from Dark Horse, and I also assume a lot of it was Dark Horse really giving Stokoe the freedom to do what he wanted. It works and it makes sense, and we can get into this more, and maybe this is sort of, I mean, I could say a billion things about Dead Orbit forever and ever, amen. I mean, honestly, it feels like that book came out at a point where Dark Horse was really giving people the freedom to do what they wanted. If you look at something like that, or something like Aliens Dust to Dust by Gabriel Hardman.
It's like they felt the mouse's shadow on the back of their neck,
I mean,
and they knew they had to.
Right? Like, this book is coming out in 2017. It was only like
it's like a year later, I think, that the real licensing started to get pulled for that stuff.
Yeah, well, Disney had started acquiring 20th Century, I believe, about 2 to 3 months before. So like the writing was on the wall, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it was great. I think what's more maybe interesting is I feel like the ending of Alien 2021 was a gutsy move on Marvel's part, to be honest. And and we can discuss that more. I don't know if anybody has anything else to say about Dead Orbit. I mean, I could go into like Stokoe found new ways to make people terrified, like the muscle people coming out of like the pods. Like,
that was gross.
I could go into the moment that you have that first shot of that muscly head emerging from the fog or the smoke.
severely burned is like the way that I think it was supposed to be taken, because it felt like they were just skinned, like flayed people, right? But it's like that they were burned severely to the point where it was just exposing their muscles. It's
right.
gross.
Yeah, it looked like the poster in your 9th grade biology classroom, of just the whole muscle system, right? Like that's literally that's what it fucking looked like. But like with patches of skin, and like I was like, tip of the hat to you, because like you found a new way to make all of this shit absolutely fucking terrifying. And I had totally forgot that one of them survives and then is like going crazy. Like what a scary, creepy character. Like,
did we ever see what happens to her?
No. Oh, no. She runs off and she takes the shuttle. She runs off and takes the shuttle. Right. And they try to stop her, but the umbilical to the shuttle is left. And so it like tears off the shuttle. And then I guess
she
there's
like
some debate
slingshots
here.
herself back into the station.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I thought was kind of a great mystery, because I was thinking, was this an uncontrollable action and it was an accident and she was trying to get away? Or was this like an intentional self-sacrificing act to like try to wipe everything off the map?
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that, but that's a very plausible theory.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
Anyway, it's a genius work of art, and that's
Yeah, it's a great story. I mean, rereading that, like I read that at a breakneck speed, not like trying to get through it, but I was just like drawn in. And again, like I remember reading the issues month to month and just being like, God damn it, how is there not more immediately? And I'm so glad to be able to sit down and just like read it all in one go, because it hits like all of the beats that you would want in an alien story of people living in these derelict like pieces of technology way out in the sticks of explored space, kind of like a really interesting commentary about like something you see along the same lines in like Firefly, or you see in I can't think of another sci-fi-ish story, but like or that encompasses this, but where this idea of like we have explored the greater distance universe or galaxy, and as per usual, people lower on the totem pole that aren't directly connected to corporations are dealing with these like barely held together, duct tape, barely functioning like stations and ships. And, I thought that like the idea of like, oh, this is like a hodgepodge of stuff. And they're like, even the space station that they were on was like falling apart. I found that to be really interesting.
Did you enjoy the Theseus joke?
I think I missed it.
They refer to the ship as
the ship of Theseus.
Yeah. Because they've been swapping out all the parts on this piece of junk so much that so.
But yeah, I mean, I just like that idea of that's almost like it's a dystopian look at like space travel, but to me it's like, yeah, people are going to do what they can to survive when they're in like stuck out in these faraway places.
Yeah, well, it goes in the face of like Star Trek, where space travel is a like governmental thing and a scientific thing.
Everybody's got uniforms, everything's clean and nice. Yeah.
Whereas these people they're effectively like oil well workers.
Yeah.
Where they have that very like roughneck look and feel to them. They're just people trying to get a paycheck,
smoking cigarettes all day.
Yeah, wearing hilariously out of fashion clothing in some cases.
Yeah,
which I also love. I love a man in a Hawaiian shirt in outer space. Something about that just tickles me to the core.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess, I mean, we don't necessarily have to focus just on this book, because we did read others. Nick, I know you were kind of transitioning to the 2021 series.
Yeah, and I can, if you want, I can just give the backdrop on that.
Yes, please.
Sure. In July of 2020, Marvel announced that Disney had pulled the publishing license for Alien, Predator, and Alien vs. Predator from Dark Horse Comics. Later that year, in early of December, Marvel announced their first project would be simply titled Alien, with Philip Kennedy Johnson handling the writing duties and Salvador LaRocca on art. It scheduled the first issue for March 2021. The first issue would indeed launch in March 2021, with subsequent monthly releases until the arc wrapped in August. Just a little extra information. They did also announce a Predator book with Ed Brisson writing with Kev Walker on art. That book has been pushed back for anyone who was kind of wondering about that. And there's rumors that it has to do with the original creators of Predator trying to reclaim the franchise. So that's another thing going on. But yeah, that was kind of the context of how we ended up getting the first Alien book under Marvel. And I know some people want to kind of compare this to the whole Star Wars franchise going back and forth, but that's a little different because Star Wars did actually originally start with Marvel, and Alien was never in Marvel's hands until this point. So, yeah.
Well, Brian, what was your take on this book?
I didn't like how they set the tone from one of the first things we see is an alien with titties.
Oh, the sexy alien. Yeah.
That was weird.
Yeah, Nick, I would just like you to read your notes for the opening, like your first note for this book, actually. Sorry, I just realized what you wrote.
Oh, God. Let me see. I wrote, I have no words for the sexy alien. No words. Quote, anyway, Doc, I'm afraid of most of them, but that one I'm super horny for.
I don't understand why that was
it's a
in the
metaphor
book.
for man's attraction to death and uncertainty.
I mean, I'll
Sure.
say this, like, if Johnson and LaRocca were trying to constantly tap into the idea that the alien beings and their aesthetics and their look is supposed to simultaneously evoke revulsion and lust at the same time, this feels a little on the nose, but it feels like you get a C+. Like you went a little on the nose, but like
They gave it a bra of chitin, Nick.
it would have been great if the bishop was like, damn, this is the worst fucking shit I've ever heard. Like,
Can we get an issue that's just about a congregation of bishops who are just like, I talked to this guy.
yeah. Like he just walks out the room and he's like, you know what? I just need to get my memory wiped. He's like, I just got to go do this right now. Like,
Yeah. Little do we know, there's actually a series of bishops that are meeting with this guy, and they're just constantly wiping their memories and replacing it with the previous guy's memories.
oh my God.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I did enjoy this series.
Yeah. Yeah, I was in the same boat. Like, I thought it was a really interesting, like, pretty fast-paced book overall. Like, I was very surprised at how much was done in the short amount of time that this arc took. And the thing that I've noticed about all these Alien books, including the one shot that we read, is like the story goes at breakneck speed because they just got to kill everyone in the story. And like honestly, the bigger the cast, the faster paced like the story seems to go. And I can't even fault them. Like, that is the point. You encounter these xenomorphs and you're gonna die, and so we're gonna get like some very terrifying ways which that's always gonna happen. And that could be just me reading a bunch of Alien stories all in one go. But man, oh man, this book just gets right to the chase. I liked it. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the art in this book, but a lot of people have criticized the faces, and I can definitely see why. There's a real uncanny valley thing to it.
Yeah. I mean, I thought LaRocca's take on the Bishop android was actually surprisingly good. I didn't realize that was an actor until I sat down to watch Aliens. I was like, oh, that's actually wasn't too bad, all things considered. I've seen his Harrison Ford. It's awful. I've seen his Luke Skywalker. It's awful.
Oh God,
Mark
the Harrison
Hamill. So,
Ford.
like,
Oof.
all things considered, I thought his interpretation of that actor who played Bishop was pretty good.
Yeah, the Lance Hendrickson wasn't bad, and I think that was sort of what was a little bit baffling for me. Is it's like likenesses should be tougher than drawing original characters because readers have nothing to compare to with original characters. But for me, like, the Bishop looked fine, and I was like, this is not normal behavior for Salvador Larroca. And then he draws this original character, and I'm like, I don't know who this is supposed to be, but it's wrong. And then I read a little bit more, and I'm like, oh, he's the protagonist too? I have to look at this a lot? Okay.
It's so weird because I felt like the Marines that he drew, with their like shit-eating grins and stuff, were not as bad as the main character. So weird. It's that like those side characters were just like okay.
The Marine that looked like Dog the Bounty Hunter could have been the main character of this book.
Sure.
There is like a distance away from the quote unquote camera that you really want his characters to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I feel like a
Yes.
lot of the group shots looked fine, but as soon as it was like a
Mhm.
close-up on one guy's face, it's kind of like, ooh, okay.
Yeah, like the close-up emoting shots are just, you know what? Give me like another, like let's observe social distancing and let's just bring this back to 6 feet, okay?
Yeah.
And it's not that it's bad exactly. It's just I truly think that it's so squarely in the uncanny valley that like
Mhm.
your face is like, that's definitely a person and also definitely not a person.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the android looks more like a person than the people in this book.
Strangely enough, yeah. But yeah, the story in this is pretty interesting, if only because I think this is, for me, like the first time I've seen any of the corporate side of Weyland-Yutani beyond like the touches that we get in the movies. And I think like maybe you see a little bit more in like just having Aliens fresh in my mind. You see a little bit at the beginning of Aliens, but I felt like the cyber espionage side of things, and hearing about like these revolutionaries and stuff, that was all new to me. And I thought that was a really interesting addition to the rest of the Aliens universe, where it's typically just like, we got to go to planet has bad alien, people all die, maybe someone gets a message out the end.
Right.
Whereas like we're actually getting a little bit of like, oh, there's these power struggles and people intentionally making choices that are like, fuck you, pay for the company or work for the company and stuff. And we do see that in Aliens, but that extra bit with the revolutionaries and like them taking over a ship and all that stuff was pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, Weyland-Yutani definitely feels more three-dimensional in this work, and I think that is appreciated. I do feel like the story, it's sort of trying to reconcile things between a father and son. Maybe we've seen a lot of this in other works, but it sort of felt like, this is something maybe that obviously Aliens hasn't really explored, so I appreciated that. I did think the shotgun blast to the guard's face near the end of issue 1, I believe, was a little too much. But if I recall correctly, and I'm totally sorry if I'm wrong, I remember people were concerned when this book was in development. They were like, is this Alien book going to be PG-13 or R? And somebody was like, don't worry guys, it's going to be R. And then somebody, I don't remember which agency or somebody, released that image, and I was like, okay, like we get it. All right, like got it.
We're all adults. Okay.
I see someone suffering from HBO season 1 syndrome. Message received.
No, Nick, there was no like actual sex on screen within the first 15 minutes.
Right,
so,
but we got like point blank shotgun to the face and sexy alien in issue 1. I was like, all right, we're getting it all out of our system. Understood, maybe. But honestly, I think this could have been done in 4 issues, not 6. That's just me. Like, I felt like there were 2 or 3 issues there where it's just people blowing up and dying, and maybe there's going to be some of that, but maybe there was too much of that. I also need to go look at my Alien canon timelines, he said. Geekily.
Wait. Is this something that you made or something that you own?
Nick's got to bust out the red string.
When someone doesn't provide you with what you need, you make it yourself. So that's what we're at. But like the 2 Marines seemed, maybe they saw it as a moment for exposition where he's like, these are what aliens are and these are what they do and this is how they work and they will kill you. It seemed very odd that these 2 other guys were completely unaware of like any of that. And I was like, I think at this point they should probably at least have heard rumors, but they were like completely like, all right, old man, they were really rude to him. There was a lot of ageism in that scene, and I did not appreciate it.
Yeah, we can excuse heads getting blown up, but we draw the line at ageism.
Yeah,
right. Well, that seems to be like the core problem in every Alien story that I've ever read, or seen, is that no one believes that these things are real, right? Or like in the case of Aliens, the movie, like they talk about bug hunts, but I don't know what that means. Like, are they talking about xenomorphs? Are they talking about other aliens that they've run into?
It's exactly what you said, Mike. That's exactly what it is. Like, they're referring to other issues with other organisms on other planets. So that part does kind of work. It is like they've seen and killed other weird, crazy things, and that's how Bug Hunt comes about. But
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
it is. I get what you're saying though. It is sort of weird, and I think this book is supposed to be post Alien 3, where people should know like rumors about aliens, but
Mhm.
they're like,
Mhm.
what is this man on? What is this old
Right.
man on?
I mean,
So,
Weyland Yutani does a whole lot of like covering up and information warfare and stuff, though. So it would not
That's
surprise me if like any word that had gotten out about these things had been like quote unquote disproven by Weyland
Oh,
Yutani
yeah.
or something. Like
Yeah,
the propaganda machine would make people think it was all fake.
yeah, and I know this part's going to be fascinating for the listeners for sure, but like, yes, that is sort of like the one guy who survives Alien 3 apparently writes this expose about it, and then Weyland Yutani goes like, this man is crazy, please don't read his book, and like that's it. This is all canon from the new RPG. This is all sort of...
Hey, I mean, we haven't even touched on that yet. I don't know if we'll have time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the last, bits of this that I thought were interesting is, like the fact that there was a secret android. Like, I always forget that that's just a thing sometimes.
there will always be one. And
there's like always a secret android, or someone doesn't realize someone's an android or something like that. Or an alien, cuts an android in half and milk goes everywhere. One of those things are going to happen in these stories.
Yeah, and that's a Ridley Scott thing, because if you look at that other recent show he did on HBO, House of Wolves, or something with wolves, Running with Wolves, something about wolves. Danny will know what I'm talking about. I have no idea. It's got a lot of the same weird milk motif. It's a Ridley Scott thing.
Okay.
Raised by Wolves. Thank you, Danny. There you go. That's the show.
Yeah. But I mean, overall, like if I were to continue, if I wanted to get into aliens, I honestly would probably keep reading this. I think it probably reads for me better as an arc rather than an issue by issue. But seriously, the issues of this book were so easy to follow. Like there was nothing confusing. Everything connected really, really well. I have to credit Philip Kennedy Johnson for honestly putting together a like pretty straightforward, easy to pick up aliens book. If you know the basics of like xenomorphs are bad, they're gonna kill you. This is a great book to go with, and because my knowledge of aliens is so limited. This book really worked for me. I don't know if it's like my top tier favorite book ever, but definitely if I wanted to get back into the what Marvel's going to be doing with this franchise, I don't think this is a bad place to start by any means.
Yeah, it does feel very approachable, and I think my biggest strength about this book is that the way it ends, it really could go anywhere. There are definitely some loose threads, some of them involving Weyland Yutani, some of them involving Gabriel Cruz's son, some of them involving the Alpha embryo. There are some loose threads, but based on what we've heard for issue 7, it certainly feels like it's going somewhere completely different. And maybe that's a misdirect, but it definitely feels like it's going to go somewhere different. And maybe this story from arc 1 goes on the back burner and it reemerges in an arc or two, or maybe we never see it again and it just is what it is. And I'm kind of okay with that, because I feel like modern storytelling of the last 10 years is everything has to have an answer, everything has to be resolved, everything needs to be played out to the nth degree. And so if there are some loose threads, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And if this becomes an anthology series, I'm okay with that. Me and the 3 other people.
Sure.
The only thing that bothered me about the ending is that it finishes on like a close up of a cat's face, and we see the cat has like face hugger marks on it. And I'm just sitting here like, hang on, because a face hugger is bigger than a cat. So, and then the ovipositor is like the size of a cat's head. So how am I supposed to like? How did a face hugger implant an embryo inside a cat?
Life finds a way, Brian, and I realize that quote's not from this film, but I feel like it still applies. So
yeah,
maybe we just need Jeff Goldblum in Alien.
I can tolerate a lot of like weird shit in my sci-fi, but I demand internal consistency.
True.
I would love it if Sexy Alien is another loose thread that never gets. That would be amazing for me. Philip Kennedy Johnson, are you ever going to resolve that? No.
Well,
No.
I
like
just wanted to see what LaRocca would draw.
because when they zoomed in on the cat's eyes, its eyes were like the sexy alien's eyes.
Oh no.
So does the sexy alien come out of that cat?
Oh no. No, no,
Oh
no,
I don't like the
no.
idea of you're combining too many things of like sexy alien furries and like
Cat girls are in right now.
and like I guess Jesus.
Go read some stuff about H.R. Giger and you will get an idea for why all of this is very weird. Okay.
Well, I guess real quick then let's talk about the last book that we read, which is Aliens Aftermath. This is a one shot, almost after watching Aliens, guys. I'm fully caught up now. This almost feels like a direct sequel to that movie.
Right.
In some ways,
Well-
more so than Alien 3, and I haven't seen that. Or Aliens to the Third Power before Nick corrects me.
What a 90s way to do what a 90s alien to the third power, it'll be rad. Okay.
Yeah. Well, this story follows, a handful of I don't want to say freedom fighters, but like streamers who are trying to take down and shove it to the man that is Weyland Yutani. And so they head to the infamous LV-426 in order to basically investigate what actually happened. And it's quite a lot. Quite a lot happens as they find out nuclear winter has taken over this little planet, and they investigate only to find, well, you guessed it, an alien. So yeah, that's like the high level sum up. But I ultimately found this to be really interesting. I thought this was a cool, quick, one and done story in the best way that you would expect out of a one shot. Like it gets to the point, it follows everything, and ultimately the end is as depressing as you would expect.
I love that they really showcased like the variability of the xenomorph form, because like that's one of my favorite things about the franchise is that depending on what the embryo goes into, you can get all kinds of weird monsters.
Right.
Like the alpha xenomorph from the 2021 series was like part goat monster ? Like it was something had inhabited a goat, and then that thing had laid eggs, and that got into a person. So we got this weird like bipedal xenomorph with horrifying ram's horns. Like
Yeah.
or in Aftermath, the case of Aftermath, we got this weird like ice blue xenomorph who had like liquid nitrogen blood instead of acid blood.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought of it. I mean, my first thought was, oh yeah, it's like the Alolan form. It's a Pokemon regional variant. Got it.
Yes. I mean, technically, it's not wrong,
Yeah.
right? It's the same kind of idea.
It is a regional form.
It is. But yeah, I mean, like I said, there's nothing like too like crazy about this. I mean, our main character is the nephew of Private Vasquez, I think, who was in the Aliens movie. We do get to see the Adios gun that she used in the movie, and yeah, they're basically there to figure out what happened because this guy in this story wants to figure out what really happened to his aunt. And yeah, they run into a xenomorph that is made of nitrogen or something. It glows in the dark, and it still can sneak up on you. I thought that was a pretty cool thing. I think Nick, a while ago, you had sent me a screenshot of this, and you were just like, "This is what they're doing now in the Aliens book." So I'm curious to know what you thought of this little one shot here.
I mean, I don't think the book resolves this, but I don't understand how that thing happened.
Well, the nuclear bomb went off, the nuclear powered plant went off or exploded. So I guess the idea is that this thing survived and grew up under those conditions.
That it had
maybe
somehow mutated and was altered by this radiation to this state. I mean, it's dumb in a way that I'm okay with. Like, yeah, it's got a cool aesthetic. It is like quote unquote a ghost. It has liquid nitrogen for blood. That results in some pretty graphic visuals that I would say I normally wouldn't see in a Marvel book, except, see, Exhibit A, shotgun blast at 2 feet. So clearly we're still rolling this out. I really liked this issue sort of in its intended form, which is that it is meant to be a celebration of the Aliens film having its 35th franchise. You do get some quotes that sort of they do mention the whole, get ready for some chop line. Thankfully, they don't. Ben Percy doesn't go so far on the nose to give us a game over man, or like I use this for close encounters. We don't get any of the big ones, so I appreciate that. One of the things I really liked was that we do get that alien feel of the shoulder cams, right? Or the shoulder cams, helmet cams. I think they were technically shoulder cams. We get a bunch of the shots where it's got the shoulder cam view from one of the people's, suit looking at one of the other people, and it's got the little digital readout in the corner of who the person is, last name, first name. And I felt that nailing that aesthetic from the film was really great, especially, having just seen it again last night. Those were some of the most terrifying moments for me, are like those just VHS/sub VHS quality, like blurry, choppy, camera footage scenes where I was like, oh my God, this is actually like pretty terrifying.
Yeah. I love the future past.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah. Absolutely.
The franchise started in 1979,
Yep.
I think. So like everything that happens now has to use technology that looks like what they used in 79.
Right.
Yeah. But I definitely loved that. I also sort of loved how this attempt to frame the narrative as sort of a renegade or sort of pirate radio-esque programming, right, resulted in these scenes where they're like filming him and he's like, yeah, I just want to find out about my niece, and then it cuts away to like that one-on-one confessional shot that you see in like Survivor or like any mid-aughts MTV programming where they're like, yeah, I said I was gonna go on a date with her, but she was totally wrong or whatever.
Yes.
And you have like this issue kind of has something akin to those moments, and I love it.
Yeah.
And then you have the TV producer who, like, all the way to his death is like constantly trying to like frame the narrative. He's like, well, we gotta frame this like he's trying to find his niece, his aunt, and find out what happened. And everyone else is like, dude, everyone is dying and you're still thinking about this.
Yeah, it's just trying to, eventually he's hoping he's going to get out of there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, overall, like I said, I thought it was a solid one shot. I think it does its job of like touching back on the roots without actually mentioning any of the characters that they may or may not have the ability to talk about. And it was good. I thought it was a pretty entertaining one shot. If you wanted to get your toes wet when it comes to aliens, I think this works pretty well.
Yeah.
And it frames Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, I was just going to say that it doesn't like reference anything from the other Aliens books, so you can just pick up this one issue.
Yeah, that's true.
And it frames Carter Burke as like even worse than we knew him to be in Aliens. So Paul Reiser's role, for those who forgot. So yeah.
There is another podcast I listen to called Cosmic Crit where they actually use the term the Burke as like a term, like, oh, this person is being such a Burke right now.
Oh, that's interesting. He's such a good character. He's God.
Oh, such a great shithead. I love him in that. Yeah, I guess I don't know. Do you guys have any final thoughts on the Aliens franchise? Anything else you wish we could have talked about or we missed?
I would say at some point I'd love to do another episode just on all the alien crossovers that have happened.
Yeah,
like I want to do the Batman Alien shit, like all the wild crap. Like Alien versus Vampirella is a thing that I have. Like,
and there's not one but two Alien Judge Dreds. There's not even one. Yes. There's actually two.
Judge Dredd versus Alien versus Predator being one of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
That could be fun. That could be a lot of fun. Nick, what about you?
I'd like to say in some ways I think we've mostly covered everything. I would encourage people who are maybe interested in some of this or want to learn more. Obviously, there is an Alien role-playing game. I think it's quite simply titled Alien, the role-playing game, surprisingly. And that came out about 2 years ago. And in addition to being a pretty fun experience, I'm maybe a little biased. I'm the GM. Mike is in this game, so he can disagree with that. It's even if maybe you're not a big role-playing game person, there's so much lore and there's so much canon that recently a lot of the materials had to be delayed because Disney had to overlook everything now that they're in charge. But if you're interested in the universe and you want to learn more about the universe, that might actually be the best place to go to learn more about Weyland-Yutani and all these other governments and all their different history with planets and things like that. So if any of this interests you and you want to learn more, the core rulebook of Alien the RPG might be the best place to do that. And you can pick up a digital copy at like Drive-Thru RPG or buy the physical book if you're interested.
Free Legan did not sponsor this episode, for the record.
Right.
But yeah, we have been playing that on the Discord. It's been pretty fun with me and a handful of other people. It's really fun to know, like, we're all going to probably die, but at the same time, we're trying to get through everything. So as problems come up, it amps up, just like an Aliens movie. So that's from my perspective as a player, it's been pretty cool.
The party has already killed the Burke of the game. So,
oh yes, we did go straight to getting rid of that business. Anyways,
boy.
well, I guess, thanks you guys for having this, and Nick and Brian, you guys came up with some comics to read for the episode. So, this is a lot of fun, and now I feel like my feet are a little bit in the pool for the Aliens franchise, and I'm worried about what that's going to do.
Like any horror movie, now we're going to grab your ankles and haul you under the water.
Yes, thank you. Well, I guess to wrap up here, next week our show is going to be all about a comic that Kara, Renee, and I decided as a group to sit down and read, and that's going to be the Disney manga that just came out, Stitch and the Samurai, where you guessed it, Stitch from Lilo and Stitch goes back in time or something to meet Samurai or becomes a samurai. I don't know what's going to happen, but we're reading that for next week, so make sure you check that out before next week's episode. Otherwise, you can follow us all on Twitter. You can follow Nick at Death Star Plans. You can follow Brian at BrianHead. You can follow me at Mike Rappin, and you can follow the show at IRCB Podcast on Twitter and Instagram.
This episode first aired on Patreon and is possible because of our wonderful patrons. You can join today for exclusive series like IRCB Movie Club, Saga of Saga, and more. And you can go join now at patreon.com/IRCB podcast.
If you haven't already, please rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you find them. I mean, if this wasn't 5-star content, I don't know what is. But it really helps us get the word out about the show. Join the IRCB Discord community to chat comics and more, and listen to our episodes live as we record. It would help us a lot if you tell your friends or even your local comic shop about the show.
Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all the music for us. We can't thank them enough. Xander is a very cool guy who makes us sound very cool every week. He's the editor, and he's fantastic. I want to say thank you to Brian and Nick for joining me on this episode. Thank you to everyone out there who listens. Thanks to Danny for hanging out with us in the chat during the live recording. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.